Cool. We are live right now, but I'm counting down from 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Jazz are one of the best teams in the Western Conference of the NBA. And of course, they're duking it out with the Phoenix Suns for that top spot as well. And here with me to talk about the Jazz is longtime Jazz fan David Kraus. How are you doing, David?
Hey, I'm good, Earl. I'm happy it's Friday and glad to be here. How about you?
I'm doing absolutely great. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this, and I really do appreciate it. A lot of you guys may have seen David when he was here for our NFL playoff previews and talking about the Vikings. And it's interesting. How are you a Minnesota Vikings fan and a Utah Jazz fan? I'm curious about the mix and blend of teams.
That's a good question. So I live in Pittsburgh here, born and raised, and my mom raised me. She was never really into sports, and the first real football game I watched was the Steelers Cowboys Super Bowl, and I think it was January of '96. And I just remember Neil O'Donnell throwing a ton of interceptions and Dallas just scoring point after point. I just said to myself as an 11-year-old boy, this team sucks. Why should I cheer for them? So then I decided to just kind of watch football casually. And as far as Minnesota, they were on TV, I think on a Thanksgiving, and I really got hooked by Randall Cunningham, and I really liked the way that he played the game. He scrambled a little bit. He had a big arm. He seemed like a nice guy. And then I also drew interest from their uniforms, the purple uniforms, and then I think a year or two later they drafted Randy Moss, and that kind of just cinched it for me. And then as far as Utah goes, so obviously Pittsburgh doesn't have a basketball team, but if they did, it's tough to say whether I'd be a fan or not. But back in the '90s, basketball was my first love as far as sports and watching on TV. And it seems like back in the mid '90s, the same three or four teams would be on TV regularly. They would have the Bulls on, I think, WGN, who had their own network. And then there was Channel 11, which all frequently showed Utah, the Seattle Supersonics, and the Houston Rockets. I think Golden State was on there a little bit back in the Hardaway, Mullen, Richmond days. And, I was always a big Jordan fan, but I didn't like the rest of the Bulls. So I saw the Jazz play, and I saw their fiery coach, Jerry Sloan, on the sidelines getting everyone pumped up. And, I really like the pick and roll game of Stockton and Malone. And they seemed like they played the game the right way. Stockton was a legitimate, point guard. They both played defense. You had to literally, unless they were suspended or had broken bones, they weren't missing any games, unlike today's players in today's NBA. So I just kind of stuck with them, and they've always been kind of a solid team throughout the years. They were never really a bottom feeder, but we're back in contention this year. So that's a long answer to your question, but so I just, rather than switching teams, which would have been easy to do with both the Vikings and the Jazz, I just decided, I'm just gonna stick with these teams and continue to root for them, whether they're good or bad.
I was also curious. I know with Pittsburgh not having an NBA team, by vicinity, who's the closest? Is it the Sixers? Is it the Cavs? Is it Washington or somebody else?
Yeah, I'm pretty. It probably could be the Wizards, but I'm going to go ahead and say it was the Cavaliers. I've actually been to a preseason Cavaliers game when they played the Spurs. No, obviously Duncan and LeBron didn't play, but it was still cool to be in an NBA arena. And that was, I think, the drive was just under 4 hours. So I'm pretty sure that's a little bit closer than getting into DC. But yeah, Philly for me is probably about a 9-hour drive, so that's a little farther out.
Yeah, that's why I was always curious of proximity. Like, I know there's nothing in Cincinnati, there's nothing West Virginia, nothing Kentucky wise. I mean, if it was ABA days, there'd be every other city that didn't have a team would have one. Pittsburgh, Kentucky, Cincinnati, every St. Louis, everybody under the sun would have a team in the ABA days.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I don't know. People seem to think that Pittsburgh wouldn't do well because with basketball, because they're a hockey town or a football town, but I'm not sure. I think I would definitely go to games, and but it's hard to tell. It seems like just basketball in general is kind of fading off, and more people are into hockey, and I don't know.
Yeah, I was definitely curious about that. Just by that, I was always wondering who do Pittsburgh fans cheer for. But I'm glad you were able to break that down. One of the things I wanted to ask you about being a Jazz fan: what is your most memorable moment as a Jazz fan?
So in terms of games, I probably have to go with the 1997 Western Conference Finals, Game 6 against the Rockets, in which it was tied at 100, and John Stockton, who scored the last two buckets for Utah, he gets the ball on after off a timeout. There's about 6 seconds left. He takes a dribble. Charles Barkley for Houston's charging at him. He pulls up from the top of the key there, 3-pointer, swish, nothing but net. Like 0.2, or it might have been an end of regulation, but that sealed the deal for Utah, sent them to their first ever finals. And just that shot, that moment kind of sticks with me because for starters, that game Utah was down double digits most of the game, and the last I think they were down 10. They were down 10 or 12 points with just under 2.5 minutes to play, and I want to say they went on like a 17-2 run to close the distance, and then like I said, Stockton hits that three. He does a leap, punches his fist in the air. Malone greets him, Hornacek and the rest of the teammates kind of swarm him, and obviously they ended up meeting Jordan and the Bulls in the finals. But it was a good finals, and yeah, that's probably the most the biggest moment or the most memorable that kind of sticks in my head.
I can think about the Greg Gumbel call when he makes that shot. He said John Stockton sends the Utah Jazz to the NBA Finals, and I'm thinking, man, that was iconic. That is probably the most iconic Jazz play, and I think about that one, and like I said before, all I do is hear Greg Gumbel's voice making the call on that play.
I love Greg Gumbel.
Going into the season, what were your expectations? I know the West always seems to be loaded, and it has been basically for the past 25 years. But going in, what were you expecting the Jazz to do?
So I expected them to finish within the top 5 as far as records in the West. They were solid last year. They were up 3-1 on Denver, and should have probably won that series. Obviously, they did not have Bogdanovich, who is their second best scorer and probably best perimeter defender on the team, and he was not available last year in the playoffs. They have him this year, and with Mitchell out, he's kind of been consistent all year. I don't think he's missed a game this year, to be honest with you. And yeah, I just think that I had expectations, but I didn't really see them, as a top seed or, into the finals. But I definitely thought they would be right around where they were, if not a little bit better than where they were last year with Bogdanovich and the core roster that they had returning.
What is the most unique piece of team related memorabilia that you have?
That's interesting because with football and baseball, I have some nice keepsakes, but with basketball, and the limited space I have in my apartment, I wouldn't say I have a bunch of unique things. I have, some nice sweatshirts and some nice jerseys, some old school jerseys. I have like three different Darren Williams jerseys, and I have a ton of Darren Williams and John Stockton basketball cards. But that would probably be it as far as memorabilia. Like I said, there's some pieces that I want, but I unfortunately just don't have the room here to store anything major.
Going into the season, pardon me, not going into the season. Was there a point during the season you knew that the Jazz were set to go make the playoffs?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it probably pretty early. Like I knew that they've been in first place basically all year. And I think with the exception of Phoenix overtaking them for a half a game for one day, they've been in first all the way through, since the season started. And I thought, okay, well, they're going to definitely make the playoffs, and it's just a matter of what their seeding is and who they match up with. But yeah, I was always, like I said, probably a month into the season. I mean, unless they started the season 0-20, I knew that they would, easily make the playoffs.
See, in that case, there was no doubt at all that they were going to miss the playoffs.
Not,
There was no concern they were going to miss.
not at all. I mean, if they were, I will tell you, like when Mitchell went down a little bit over a month ago, if they were in maybe the seventh seed at that time, I would have been a lot. My answer for you would be differently. But they really haven't missed too much with him, with Clarkson stepping up and like I said, Bogdanovich kind of up in his game offensively to pick up the scoring slack for Mitchell not being there. So yeah, I mean with them, the fact that they're still in first place, even with Conley, being in and out of the lineup with his hamstring, and he's elevated his play this year as well. So the fact that they're still in first place with those injuries, is kind of remarkable.
Who do you think the Jazz match up the best with in the Western Conference?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they match up well with um, just about anybody, but I like their odds if they get Portland. I like their odds if they get Dallas. I like their odds if they get um, if Golden State were to somehow make a surge. Honestly, even Denver at this point, I know Jamal Murray's been a Utah killer in the past, especially in the postseason. But with him being out this year, if we ended up getting Denver, I'd be very confident with that matchup, especially if Mitchell's back. I mean, obviously the Joker's going to get his, but I don't think that they have the overall team without Murray to compete with the Utah. So yeah, I'd be very comfortable. Phoenix is seemed like they had our number for the most part this year, but I even be comfortable with them.
Looking at some of the teams you didn't mention, who worries you in the Western Conference? And I'm assuming the Lakers and the Clippers are at the top of that list.
They're definitely at the top. Although with the Lakers, I think they're currently in the seventh seed. I'm not sure, like if that stands and they end up getting like a Golden State in a one game series. I would not want to play Steph Curry in a 1 game series to advance. And I'm not certain LeBron or AD are going to be anywhere close to healthy. But if they are, and if they were, then yeah, definitely they present problems for everybody, including Utah for sure. But I just think LA has a couple beasts on their team that are excellent one-on-one players, and they would be a tough out for Utah.
Um, I guess looking at really Quin Snyder making the move from coaching college to the NBA. When you heard of the hire a few years back, did you think he was going to be legit? I know he had a lot of baggage with him, especially his time at Missouri. But to you, did you think he would be able to make that transition so seamlessly?
You know what? I didn't. To be honest, I didn't even know a whole lot about him at the time, and I thought a couple years ago, I actually thought that maybe it was time to move on from him. That he was getting out coached by coaches like Terry Stotts and um, Malone over in Denver, that he was just getting out coached in big moments. But the way that he's handled the team under the pressure this year, and like I said, maintaining that first place has been very impressive. But no, I didn't think he would not only do well, but to hold up this long. I think he's been in Utah. It's got to be almost 10 years at this point. So um, yeah, he's been very impressive.
Um, how far can the Jazz go with a healthy Donovan Mitchell?
I think if everyone is healthy, they have the ability to get to the finals. They and that's assuming, like, ideally they would want you would want LA to play LA at some point. One of them knock each other off, and then Utah match up with who the other team is. And yeah, I think with, like I said, with Bogdanovich getting this extra offensive play, Clarkson, if Conley's healthy, if Mitchell's healthy, obviously Gobert is a monster in the middle. O'Neal's a good defender. He's upped his game this year a little bit on both ends of the court. They have, they play the game the right way. They shoot the three ball, they defend, they hustle, they slash, they get to the free throw line, and like you said earlier, they're well coached. So there's no reason for me to believe that if they're on and they play to their maximum capabilities, they can go to the finals. Um, especially, I mean, it's not like they're not gonna beat LA 4-0, or they're not gonna. I mean, it's gonna be a grueling series, whether it's 6 or 7 games. But yeah, I definitely think they can get there. Do I personally think they will? No, but to answer your question, they can certainly get there. They have the ability.
NBA Finals prediction. Who do you have coming out of the West? Who do you have coming out of the East? Who wins it all, and in how many games?
Do you just want the straight answer, or do you want an explanation on why I think it's going to be that way?
Oh, we can go with the explanation. I'm all for it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm going with the Clippers matching up against the Nets, and I say that because I feel like the Nets knew all along that they were going to be set up for a long playoff run, and I think the really only true challenge might be the Bucks. I don't have faith in Philly enough just yet. They haven't proven anything to me, and I don't think any other team's really deep enough, other than maybe Milwaukee. But Milwaukee just relies on Giannis too much. So starting with the Nets, I just think that big three, even if assuming they're even 80% healthy, which I think everyone is healthy at this point. Harden might not be 100%, but he's still working his way back. But even if let's say Harden and Kyrie go 2 for 30, Durant's going to knock you with 45 and 10. And then you got Joe Harris, you got some knockdown shooters. Blake Griffin's up this game. Well, it was a nice acquisition for them. DeAndre Jordan, so their defense might concern you a little bit, but they're gonna score 130, 140 easily every night. Um, so I just don't think that there's any team out there that can consistently beat them, especially when you get into a deep 7-game playoff series. So that's why I shoot them in there. And then as far as the West, I think the way that I've watched the Clippers this year, especially with Paul George, I feel like Paul George has upped his game. He reminds me of prime Indiana Pacer Paul George before he got injured. He's slashing, he's defending, he's dunking on people, he's shooting threes, he's not playing a ton of minutes either. They're not playing him a lot of minutes over there. Tyronn Lue's not. So the fact that, you got him coming back after a bust of a 2020, not 2019, 2020 season, and you got Kawhi, who's now healthy. He's had his rest days. I really like the acquisition of Rondo, and Rondo in the playoffs is a real problem, as he proved last year with the Lakers. So I just like that combination. I like Zubac. I don't think they're gonna, Reggie Jackson will be fine off the bench. Kennard was a good pickup. So I think if they're healthy, and they'll probably be more healthy than the Lakers at this point, and they're in a better position standing wise, I think they'll be able to get into the finals. So with that said, I have, and this is kind of painful to say because I'm not a big fan of the superstars teaming up, but I actually think that the Nets will be the champions, and they will win in 6 games over the Clippers. And did you ask me what the score would be of the last game?
Oh no, we can just. I mean, you can add that if you want.
Yeah, no, I think obviously it'll be a shootout. I don't know what the exact score will be, but it'll definitely be a shootout series. And yeah, I just think that the Nets will just, like I said, just be, Clippers have 2 superstars, Nets have 3, plus role players that are, that are deadly shooters. So I think that after they know that they disappointed last year and they underachieved. So with bringing in Rondo and, assuming Beverly's healthy, you have some ball handlers and, they can match up with basically any team.
And the unfortunate thing about the Nets would be if they win, it just encourages more bad behavior and everybody starting to load up even more. It was bad enough with Miami, and now it's just going to be a continual thing. And who knows until that plan stops working, but that seems how it's going to be. David, I really do appreciate you taking your time out of the busy schedule to do this. Before we wrap this up, do you have anything, any shout outs you want to give to anybody you want to, anything you want to promote, or if you have any ways people can reach out to you on social media?
Yeah, no, nothing to promote. Just, yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate this, and this was fun. And yeah, I'm on Instagram as Kraus Daddy, and I'm also on Facebook just as David Kraus. And yeah, I'll connect or talk sports with anyone.
Definitely. I really appreciate it, David. We'll talk a little more offline once we wrap this live stream up. For everybody who's watching, come back in a few minutes. We're going to be talking a little more Western Conference basketball, talking the LA Clippers, and much more. For everybody who's been watching, I'll see you guys in a few minutes. For my guest, David Kraus, really appreciate it. We'll talk a little bit offline in a few seconds. But for everybody watching, tune into in about 5-10 minutes.